Picture this, August 11th, 2022. A small plane is flying over West Virginia, and the pilot makes what seems like a totally routine course correction to dodge a storm. But just minutes later, that plane and the 3 people on board, they were just gone. What the investigation uncovered was this fatal misunderstanding of the very technology that was supposed to keep them safe. Okay, let's get into it.
Right off the bat, this was not a crash landing. The NTSB, that's the National Transportation Safety Board, they determined the aircraft experienced a catastrophic failure while it was still thousands of feet in the air. We're talking about a violent in-flight breakup. The plane literally came apart in the sky.
And the severity of this event, it's just staggering. The wreckage field, and that's the distance between the very first piece of the plane found on the ground and the very last, was almost a mile long. This wasn't some minor accident. It was a total structural disintegration at altitude. So here are the basic facts. It was a personal flight in a Piper PA-32, which is a really reliable single-engine plane. On board, you had the pilot and 2 passengers. They were all members of the same church, just heading home from a day trip. And tragically, none of them made it.
So that's the million-dollar question, right? How does a perfectly sound airplane with an experienced pilot just come apart in midair? This is exactly what the NTSB had to figure out.
So where do you even start with an investigation like this? Well, the first step is always to rule out the most obvious things. You start with the machine itself.
You see, the NTSB's job isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about finding the probable cause so they can make sure this never, ever happens again. Their investigators went over that nearly mile-long wreckage field piece by meticulous piece.
And what they found, or rather what they didn't find, was surprising. The plane was clean. The fractures on the metal showed it had been torn apart by forces that were just way beyond its structural limits. But the engine, the flight controls, all the core systems, they were all working perfectly. There was absolutely no sign of mechanical failure before the breakup.
And that is such a crucial point. If the plane didn't fail, then investigators have to look somewhere else. And that's exactly what they did. The focus of the whole investigation pivoted away from the wreckage and toward the 2 things left: the person flying the plane and the weather they were flying into.
Now, let's step into the cockpit for a minute. Thanks to the recordings from air traffic control, we have this incredible window into the pilot's final moments and the critical decisions he was making based on the data he saw right in front of him.
Okay, so at 5:52 p.m., the pilot radios ATC. He says he's looking at his in-cockpit weather display, his NextRad system, and he's planning a move to navigate around a line of storms. He is doing exactly what you'd expect a cautious pilot to do.
And this image here shows us pretty much what the pilot was seeing on his screen. You can see the plane's path flying alongside this really nasty line of weather. And right there, he spots what he thinks is a safe way through, a gap in the storm.
Just seconds later, the air traffic controller responds. And you really have to listen to the caution in his voice. He confirms the storm has pockets of extreme weather, but then he adds, "I'm just not real sure if they are in fact gaps from your point of view." That's a subtle but absolutely critical hint that what the pilot is seeing might not be the whole story.
9 minutes go by, and the pilot makes his turn. But look at this radar image. The plane didn't fly into a gap. It flew directly into the worst of it. It went from light rain to moderate to heavy and then right into an area of extreme precipitation. That deep, dark red you see there, the very core of the storm. And this is the part that's just chilling. Right before making that final turn, the controller had mentioned seeing what looked like a small gap about 5 miles ahead. The pilot's response, his very last words were, "Yep, that's what we're looking for." He was completely confident he was flying towards safety, when in reality he was flying into oblivion.
So what on earth happened? How could a pilot and an air traffic controller, both looking at radar, see 2 totally different things? Well, the answer is a hidden danger that, honestly, many pilots aren't fully aware of: a time delay.
The culprit has a name. It's called NextRad latency. And what it means is that the fancy weather picture a pilot sees in the cockpit, it's not live, it's not real time, it's a picture of the recent past. There's this delay that's just baked into the system, and in a fast-moving storm, that delay can be absolutely fatal.
So let's break it down like this. On the pilot's screen, he saw an old picture, a snapshot in time where a gap in the storm existed. But in the real world, in those 9 minutes since he'd been talking about it, that gap had slammed shut.
He was using an old map to navigate a brand new and very deadly territory. So why is there even a delay? Well, because the data has to go on a whole journey to get to the cockpit. First, a big radar on the ground scans the storm. Then, that data gets processed into a nice picture. That picture gets beamed up to a satellite, then beamed back down to the plane's receiver, and then it finally shows up on the screen. Every single step in that chain adds time.
And this is the most shocking part from the NTSB's own safety alert about this problem. Pilots might think, okay, maybe there's a 5-minute delay. But in bad weather, the picture on the screen can be up to 15 or even 20 minutes older than what's actually happening outside. The pilot was flying completely blind, and he had no idea.
This whole tragedy offers such a powerful lesson, and it's not just about aviation. It's about our relationship with technology. We have to truly understand the tools we rely on, especially their limitations.
So here it is, the NTSB's official probable cause. They said the pilot, who wasn't rated to fly using only his instruments, intentionally flew into the storm. And here's the kicker. That decision was based on dangerously old or latent weather data, and that directly led to him losing control and the plane breaking apart.
So how do we prevent this from ever happening again? The NTSB's advice is crystal clear. 1. Always get a full official weather briefing before you even take off. 2. Use every tool you have in the air. Don't just rely on one screen. And 3. Most importantly, you have to know the limitations of your technology.
This quote from that NTSB safety alert just says it all. Remember that the in-cockpit next ride display depicts where the weather was, not where it is. That single distinction, was versus is, that's the critical lesson here, a lesson written in the sky by this terrible accident.
And that really leaves us with a bigger question, one that goes way beyond the cockpit. We live in a world that feels completely instantaneous, right? We trust the data on our screens without a second thought. But this story is such a powerful reminder that there can be a hidden lag, a dangerous gap between reality and what our screens are telling us. How do we learn to see that gap before it's too late?